Here's a challenge I'd like some of my Christian brothers and sisters to try out. When we talk about being grafted in, it's something that I remember the first time I heard. I actually was pretty happy to hear about that. We have salvation. Adonai, our God, has given us the opportunity to be saved, to experience salvation through him by sending his son, which I am so happy for, so grateful for. And now our job is to spread his message. However, when I think of the Jews, I think of many years of struggles and not doing what they're supposed to do in order to be obedient to God. When we say we're grafted in, I think we miss something. I think when we see a lot of churches saying that we don't need to read the Old Testament anymore, we're missing one of the biggest key elements of our God. And that is when we look at Leviticus and Deuteronomy and even Exodus, can anyone tell me when God said that Gentiles could not worship him? God has never said that. God never said that Gentiles could not worship him. He even allowed Gentiles to sacrifice. There were places in the temple that they weren't allowed. Yes, we know that, or at least if we read the Old Testament, we know that. But can anyone find a point when God said that Gentiles could not worship him? I'm not asking about the Jews. I'm asking about God. You know, in Orthodox Judaism, not Messianic, not to be mistaken with Messianic Judaism, but in Orthodox Judaism, there's texts inside the Torah that are forbidden to read. And many of those texts actually point straight back to Yeshua as being our Messiah. And unfortunately, that's a religious thing, right? I don't agree with it. And they're lost just like many people in this world. However, I see in our Christian faith that it's almost the same thing, though. When I see churches or Christian brothers and sisters saying that we don't have to read the Old Testament. The Old Testament, we don't need that anymore. There's no different. Orthodox Jews mention that there's forbidden texts because they're avoiding something. And it is the truth that Jesus is the Messiah, and it was prophesied in many books like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel. But a lot of Christians do the same thing when they say the Old Testament, and we no longer need it. So here's my challenge. When we say we've been grafted in, I believe that Jesus was opening the eyes of the people, like he did for Paul on the road to Damascus. However, he opened our eyes. He didn't change his words. God has always allowed us to worship him, always. But it was because of our stubborn hearts that we misunderstood his word, like a lot of us are doing today. I would like to challenge my brothers and sisters to find anywhere in the Old Testament that God said that we could not worship him as Gentiles. We see King Nebuchadnezzar. I could mention more Gentiles in the Old Testament. Nebuchadnezzar happens to be one that stands out to me. But we see other Gentiles in the Old Testament that did worship the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, the God of heaven and earth. Adonai is our God. He is the creator of all things, and he has always allowed his people to worship him. He gave the task to the Jews to get his message out. And yes, the Jews didn't do well, just like many Christians aren't doing well. But the challenge, though, still stands. Can you find anywhere in the Bible, from cover to cover, from Torah to the Brit Hadashah, or that's the New Testament, can you find anywhere where God says that we as Gentiles could not worship him? I hope this message resonates. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe to the page, and I look forward to responding to the messages I do every day. You guys take care and be safe.